some of you may know, because I sent you a number of emails and encouragements to attend, I think this is very important. And in November of 2016, I decided that for the first time, I had to get politically active. That what was going to happen to this country, I was afraid, was going to be impairing the future of my grandchildren and just the world in general. I wasn't wrong. And since then, I've been searching for something that I, and by extension, we can do to have the maximum impact. And it's been a revelation for me how much opportunity there is out there, because the science and art of electing officials is not nearly as well developed as I had thought it would be. And in my search for things that I could do that would be significant, the first thing I did immediately was start Protectors of Equality in Government, whose mission was and is to see that we have a government that treats everybody with equality and respect. And it's great. It's primarily located, most of the readership, but by no means all, it's in the 12th congressional district here, and about 1,000 people a week open it up, and I'm proud of it. And then in 2018, with someone from the Democratic Party, we produced 1 million voter guides, 15 different versions distributed around the state of Michigan, and that was great. And then in 2020, did WAVE, which allowed people to look up registered voters that they might know to see whether they were likely Democratic voters or not, and likely to vote, and many other things, and people could reach out to them, and that was great. But I continued to search for other things, and I ran across DemCast. And as you will hear, in their own words, what DemCast is doing, I think, is tremendous, but it's just scratching the surface, and it has a vital role to play. And hopefully by the end of this hour, you're going to say, maybe I want to be part of this too. So with that, and we didn't work out the choreography here, but Nick is the senior member here by I don't know how many hours of DemCast. Could you tell us a little bit about how DemCast came about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Chuck. Really excited to share about this project with everybody. This is a passion project for Jamie, Lori, and myself, but also we feel a crucial thing that needs to be happening in our country right now. And the reason that we started doing it is because nobody else was, so we just had to pick up and do it ourselves. So DemCast is a 501c4 nonprofit organization, so we're a social purpose nonprofit. And our mission is really to lift the voices of the grassroots, to spread strategic messaging that helps build our movement, and to use social media and digital to engage our base and motivate them to participate, and turn people out to vote and to participate in civically in democracy. So ultimately the and I think we're going to play the Dan Pfeiffer clip in a little bit, where he does a really great job of sort of talking about the landscape that led to us needing the DemCast intervention. So I won't go down the landscape lane, but effectively what we're trying to do is empower individuals to use their social media accounts to spread messaging that's helpful for our movement.
And indeed, the clip that I promised you that we would play from Dan Pfeiffer and Senator Doug Jones, I think is extraordinarily compelling. And yes, Nick, you'd have a tough time telling a story as well as they do. Lori and Jamie, how did you hook up with this guy?
Well, I ran across Nick. We're pretty sure we narrowed it down to sometime in 2017. And in 2015 and 2016, before Trump, I considered myself just a a citizen, a concerned and educated voter, but not a political activist at all by any means. But then when Trump won and Hillary lost, I said to myself, I didn't do anything to make sure that she won. And being in a red state, it was really frustrating because I didn't feel like I go vote, but I didn't feel like my vote really counted that much. But I knew I didn't do anything. So surely something would be better than nothing. And that I wasn't going to go to bed in 4 years again and not know that I didn't do everything that I could do to make sure he did not win again. And I ended up joining some groups on Twitter, ran into Nick. He was just a visionary. He's a visionary. He's a writer, and came up with a great idea called Wavecast during the 2018 election cycle, where we just like in at the last minute, 5 days before the election, we gathered some people up and said, let's just post the heck out of everybody showing up to the polls, and ended up generating, I think, 350 million impressions and a last minute sort of activity. And that's when the light bulb really went off, I think, for all of us to go, wait a minute, if all of us are talking about the same thing at the same time, we could really make an impact. And I think out of that grew the idea of DemCast. And Nick and I got together and worked out the beginning details, and we've been assembling this airplane while we've been flying it for the last 4 years now.
And Jamie, how did you join this crew? You're muted.
I'm a kitten playing in the Christmas tree, and so if you hear jingles, that's why. Well, a funny story on this, I actually put Nick in his first Twitter DM group many, many years ago. Back then he had about 5,000 followers, and turned out he was DMing everybody privately. But I've been involved in politics since Obama. I'm from Utah, so I knocked doors in Colorado, foam pinked into Nevada, and door knocked for Hillary here. And then after Trump started doing more and more, worked for our local state Democratic Party as a regional field director for the 2018 elections. And then when Nick and Lori started this, I jumped on board.
She was invited. It wasn't just that she jumped.
Thank God.
Jamie is an amazing activist, and we needed her as a part of our team to help make the whole thing go.
And do all three of you work out of the international office?
We do.
The international office of our living rooms
of the planet Earth, right? So yeah, I'm in Portland, Oregon. Jamie's in Salt Lake City, and Lori's just outside of Nashville.
So you've yet to have your first office, correct?
Correct.
Right. An office, really.
Yeah, we're in an office.
Okay.
Someday we'll see.
And what you did in 2020 was pretty impressive. You want to give us that report that you have on your website? What you were able to accomplish in 2020? Don't show it, tell it.
Yeah, you bet. So we went into we founded in August of 2019. So it was already sort of the beginning of the middle of the 2020 cycle. And then it took a while to get going. So we really think of us really starting around January 1st, 2020. We had a goal that we would hit like 20 billion social media impressions for the content that we were pushing, and that we would have maybe 10,000 people sign up to be a part of the team, be a social media amplifier through us. And we blew those out of the water. So by the election, we had 36 billion impressions instead of 20. And we had about 30,000 people who had signed up to be a part of DemCast and were actively sharing content through us. So so just on the sort of uptake metrics, we did really well in comparison to where we thought we would be. Now to put the 36 billion impressions in context, if you were going to pay, through paid promotion through a social media platform to reach that many eyeballs, you would have to pay about $252 million. So the value of the product is really significant, and we talk about that as much as we can.
Well, you should. It appealed to me.
Yeah. But just outside of reaching people's eyeballs, we also, created a lot of activity even outside of the social media sharing that we were doing. So we didn't even have a goal of raising money for the movement going into the cycle, but we found that just by people sharing Act Blue links through their social media accounts, we were able to raise through our network $1.4 million for candidates and causes across the United States, from Warnock and Ossoff, who we raised $100,000 for each of them just online, down to like super hyper local races, to state legislative races. So I think in total we raised something for about 300 candidates in about a dozen groups like Black Voters Matter or the New Georgia Project, and totaling 1.4 in total. So great stuff there to build on going forward. We can be an engine for the movement, for the broader movement, not just for DemCast. And then we also motivated people to action. So we shared, this is just in the last 2 months of the cycle, we shared mobilize links through our social media feeds on our team to get people to sign up for door knocking. Well, there wasn't much door knocking happening at the time because of the pandemic, but more phone banking and text banking. And we got people to sign up for about over 12, I think it's like 12.5 thousand shifts. And those people sent 6.5 million texts and made over 100,000 phone calls for candidates down the stretch in the last 2 months there. So kind of proving a point that digital isn't just digital. Digital, when you're focused on reaching the base, and you're motivating people to action, you can use the digital reach that you have to get people to do more than just be keyboard warriors.
And how much money did you have to spend to get this $250 million worth of impressions?
So in the 2020 cycle, we spent $200,000.
Okay. Now, do you see everyone who's on this call why this grabbed me? Because I was a businessman. I still have a businessman's mentality. And then the idea of a return on investment is a very strong motivator for me. And I'm continually impressed with the opportunity here. But and this is a theme I may return to. There was something non-monetary, however, that was invested in this. And it was the relationships that the volunteers had with people. You can't put a dollar number on that, but it was spent on behalf of these campaigns. So I think it would be a good time to see why don't you introduce Dan Pfeiffer?
Sure.
And then play the video as well. And this comes from, go ahead.
Yeah, so Dan Pfeiffer, as many of you may know, is the former White House communications director under Obama, and he's also now the co-host of Pod Save America through Crooked Media. He's if you don't subscribe to it, maybe one of us will find the link. He puts out a newsletter called The Message Box that we consider to be critical reading for people who want to help influence the narrative online about what's happening in our country. So I definitely recommend you subscribe to that. And with that, I'll share a video. This was a conversation we had just a week ago on another call where we had both Dan Pfeiffer and Senator Doug Jones from Alabama, former Senator Doug Jones from Alabama, talk about the landscape, digital landscape, media landscape, and the need for DemCast and for us to use our voices in this way. So I will share my screen. Okay. Let's see.
I am very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be with you because what DemCast is doing is addressing what I see as the biggest deficit and the biggest problem that Democrats have. I have been in Democratic politics for 20 years. I have worked for senators, I worked for Senate leaders, I worked on multiple presidential campaigns, I worked for President Obama for 6 years in the White House. And throughout that period, whenever I would go to a convention or a fundraiser or anything else, I would always get this question, like, why are Democrats so bad at messaging? Why are we getting beat? Where's our slogan? Where's our bumper sticker? Where's our soundbite? And while I will stipulate that Democratic messaging can always be better, I have come to the conclusion, particularly since 2016, that the biggest problem Democrats have is not message, it's megaphone. And our messaging is being drowned out. We can spend all the time in the world thinking about what we are saying, but what we're missing is what voters are hearing. And they are not hearing what even if we have the perfect message, voters aren't hearing. It is being drowned out. And we are being dominated on a daily basis by a massive billionaire-funded right-wing media infrastructure. We always think about this in the context of Fox News. And Fox News is obviously very powerful and very important. It was obviously very influential with the former president. But the average on any given night, Tucker Carlson, who is the most watched person on Fox, gets 4 million or so viewers. That's a lot of people for cable news. That is a fraction of the electorate. It's a fraction of the people who drive the conversation. But what happens is everything what happens on Fox News, whether it happens on Breitbart, Free Beacon, Federalist, Daily Caller, OAN, Newsmax, I go on and on and on, is being carried out and put into the world. And two things happen with that. And this is why we are losing this battle. And we should be very clear. Democrats are not just losing the information wars, we are getting destroyed in the information wars. And I think a large majority of establishment elected Democrats do not realize that and do not understand why. And it is a huge problem. And one interesting thing I'd say is if you look, I just gave you a long list of, right-wing propaganda, disinformation outlets. And every single one of those is founded by a Republican billionaire who has an interest in a financial interest and a policy interest in ensuring that Republicans get elected. That is, they've created a media apparatus that operates as an adjunct of Republican Party apparatus. There is almost nothing like that on the Democratic side. There are some things that have started. Crooked Media, which hosts Pod Save America, which I work on, is a part of that. There are a handful of other things, but on a scale, it is a huge problem. And so you say to yourself, yeah, each of those things individually has a relatively small reach. How is that competing with everything else? How is that getting tens of millions of people to believe that the election was stolen, or to believe that vaccines are iffy or any whatever the Republican conspiracy theory of the day is. And it happens in two ways. One is that messaging that's whether it's on Facebook whether it's on Fox or Breitbart or wherever else is being carried to tens, if not hundreds of millions of people via Facebook. And in social media, all social media is implicated here, but Facebook is the primary way in which a lot of people are getting their news. And it is the biggest driver of political conversation. And I'll give you an example of just how tough Facebook is for Democrats. On the day that Facebook's quote unquote Supreme Court reinstated Donald Trump's suspension that happened after January 6th, a lot of Democrats celebrated Donald Trump's not on Facebook. That's great. That is good for the world. It's good for democracy. But every day there is a Twitter account that scrapes the 10 posts with the most engagement from any over the last 24 hours, and it tweets it out. And I get Twitter alerts for this because I am a sick person with a sad life. And on the day that we defeated Donald Trump, we kept him off Facebook, here was what the top 10 looked like. Numbers 1 and 2 were Ben Shapiro. There were 3 posts by Dan Bongino in there. There was one by Tucker Carlson, and 8 of the 10 were all conservative figures. We had one Rachel Maddow post and one from some sort of cute pets picture thing, which did well. But that is it. Everything else was far right-wing agitprop. And that happened. I get that email, that Twitter alert every day. That's happening every single day. And so they're pumping content into Facebook. Facebook is carrying to people. And then they have built an army of people who are sharing that content. And the more the content gets shared, the more it gets shown to more people organically. I don't know if you would remember this, but there was a time late in the campaign where Donald Trump did a series of tweets congratulating his keyboard warriors, which was this army of, it seemed like yet another ridiculous thing Donald Trump was doing, but what he was actually doing is communicating directly with an army of people. They are people who are active on social media. They are digital activists. They are making memes. They're making graphics. They are making videos and spreading that world out there. There was almost nothing like that other than DemCast, which I'll get to in a second, happening on the Democratic side. We are getting outworked, outmanned, out amplified in every way, shape, or form. And the primary reason why that is happening is twofold. The first is the overwhelming majority of people who are the decision makers and the power players in Democratic politics still believe that the best way to get your message to people is twofold. One is paid advertising, usually through television ads. And 2 is through the media, that we're going to decide that we're going to give our message to the New York Times, the CNN, the Washington Post, and we're going to ask them to give it to our voters. 2 problems with that. 1, media not trusted by a lot of people. 2, very limited reach. In fact, mostly speaking to people we already have. And 3, they're taking our message, they're putting it through their own filter and then giving it to voters. And when you see all these polls that say why about how Democratic voters do not know what's in the Build Back Better bill or whatever else, and it's because we're relying on the press, which has no interest, right? They have their own interests. In many cases, those interests are noble, but they're not our interests. It is not their job to communicate positive messages about Democrats. It's not their job to communicate negative messages about Republicans. It's their job to do journalism and make money for themselves. And when you hand over control of your most important asset, your message, to people who don't share your interests, you're going to lose. And so I think that the second part of that problem, and this brings me to why we're here tonight, is there are millions, as evidenced by the 2020 election, there are millions and millions and millions of activists around this country who are willing to spend so much time and energy working to elect other Democrats. And we used to think that that was only by knocking doors or making phone calls, but we learned during the pandemic, people will sit at their computer, or when they use their phone, they will text people, they will use these auto dollars and make calls to do all of this. And the problem with, I think, a lot of thinking within the Democratic Party is that we think of our voters or our activists as ATMs and telemarketers, right? And we don't recognize that each and every one of them are a message amplifier. They have in their pocket, in most cases, a phone that has, with a network on average of more than 100 people, whether that is their phone contacts, their Facebook friends, their Instagram friends, people they follow on Twitter or TikTok. They've access to these people and they have influence. And there was a really interesting study from the American Press Institute that came out late last week or early this week, I can't remember which, that showed that people now put more value and trust in a news article based on not on who wrote the article or what publication it was in, but on who shared it. And that is the power that we all have, because there are people out there in our lives, they may be politically active, they may not be politically active, who will believe something if we share it with them, as opposed to if they just read about it, because of this natural skepticism towards the news. And so that is why I have been such a big fan of DemCast and what they're doing, because this is the first organization that is working to turn democratic activists into message amplifiers. And I believe the only way we can sit around and hope that some liberal billionaire is going to buy Fox News from the Murdoch family and shut it down, or we're going to figure something else out. But the only way that we're going to have any chance, and we need to obviously invest in progressive media, like working media, of course. But the only way we're really going to compete is if we build this army of activists who are going to carry our message, because they may have the money, but we have the people, and this is our chance to do it. But we have to do it at scale, and that is something that Nick and Lori and the team at DemCast are doing.
Pretty powerful.
So you can, the part that I don't show is that after I came on after Dan and said that I would play Dan's, that 9-minute segment there. When I'm not doing well, when I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna play the former White House communications director and messaging expert saying that we're on the right track. So it was cool to have that endorsement. But we've been talking to him for a year and getting his feedback on how to build this and getting his getting the continued motivation from him so that we can keep going through the struggles of building it. So it was he's a great ally and really, like I said, like subscribe to Messagebox, because he's
Nobody was talking about this. Should have been one of the biggest bills that we were talking about. So we did a tweet storm starting yesterday. And the 8 days leading up to this vote, there were less than 100 tweets about this. And so between yesterday and today, there were over 11,000 tweets about it. 12,500 tweets in 24 hours with almost 100 million impressions. And that was just on one platform. That does not account for the over 300 shares that were on Facebook and Instagram. So.
And just to be clear, this is through DemCast's efforts.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So the monetary value of that, again, coming back to that, the monetary value of 100 million impressions is, close to $500,000. So, and that was, the three of us, piecing together some language from Adam Schiff and putting it in a toolkit and getting it out there. So this is it's not rocket science, but it is something that it takes time and effort to do, and we need the people who will be behind the curtain, putting all the messaging together, but that's only like part of it. That's the DemCast part of it. The more important part of it is the people who will go to that toolkit and share from it, and what we've tried to do is make what we've recognized, having received, and I'm sure everybody on this call has probably received a Google Doc from some organization, multiple organizations. Here's our messaging toolkit. And it's like 7 paragraphs and then some sample post language that where the character count isn't right, depending on which platform you're using. And then you have to go to the separate drive to download the graphics, and it just doesn't work. The people on this call may, I mean, and because these are probably very dedicated activists, but the bulk, to do this en masse, to create the sort of groundswell that you need, that's not going to cut it. So what we've tried to do is make it easier for people to share, like 1, 2, 3 clicks, personalize a message and post it to your own social media account. And so that's a big piece of what we've done, but it isn't everything, because the personalization is a really important part of the process here. So we try and make sure that people are educated about the most important issues, the most important messages that are happening on a given day, and let them, take it. And because if the issue of the day is expanding childcare access, somebody's got a personal story about that. And that's, if they can add their personal sort of slant to that issue, it's going to resonate more and be more effective in the social media space.
Well, we'll spend time on a subsequent session showing people how this works and indeed encouraging them to be a part of it. Tonight, however, I want you all to get some idea of the scope and opportunity we have here, because we're going to be asking you to help spread the word. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. While we're looking at videos, why don't we take a look at Senator Jones?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Senator Doug Jones, you may remember, he lost his reelection bid in 2020, unfortunately. But he won one of the most important races, I think, in recent memory. In 2017, was the first major election after Trump got elected. And he was running against the pedophile in Alabama, Roy Moore. and we connected. Lori and Jamie and I were all sort of in the mix here in terms of like trying to help be part of a social media army that was amplifying that race. And so that's the context from which he comes to support the DemCast model, because he really feels like the social media piece of that 2017 campaign was a huge factor in his win. So that's the context of this clip. Just hang on one second. No. There we go.
Look at all that has happened in the last 10 months since Joe Biden became president. We had COVID packages that passed. We had the infrastructure bill that passed. We're on the verge of a Build Back Better bill. But yet the president's numbers are in the tank. And so are most Democrats. We are fighting to get out of a hole in 2022. And that is in large measure exactly what Dan was talking about the social media content. We cannot rely on the media. We can't rely on all of the traditional ways of doing things. And when you think about what Dan was talking about the machine and the army that Republicans have every day that's pushing out there, and Democrats playing an uphill battle, I want to mention my race a little bit in 2017, because we're the flip side of that on a much smaller scale. Remember, in 2017, I was the only race going on at the time after we had the Virginia race, we had the New Jersey race, but they didn't get incredible amounts of attention, not anything like we got in December of 2017. And our campaign was very compressed. I was a lawyer, I wasn't doing social media in May of 2017 when I decided to run for this office. I can remember my campaign treasurer, who had no experience in social media, texting me at night excited that we had another 50 likes on Facebook. Now we were up to 100 or 150. It was just, and that's the way we were doing it. We were doing old school kind of things. Then as it became clear that Roy Moore was going to be the nominee, that's when David came into the picture and talked to all of us, helped us learn what the social media would do and how it would go. It would help for fundraising for somebody like me outside of Alabama, but more importantly, build that army. And we started to work. And what we were able to do with DemCast help, with David's help and so many others, build a messaging army on a single race, build an infrastructure from scratch based around one single race and a single candidate. I didn't have any help from the Alabama Democratic Party. We effectively didn't have one at the time. I was getting some help from the DSCC. I was getting some help from the DNC, but it was our infrastructure on social media that really built this. And we were lucky. We were really fortunate running against Roy Moore, who had no social media presence. The best social media he had was, his horse and not a real message. And he wasn't getting any help. After a little bit, the Republicans saw who he was. And so that message machine that would have normally been in place was not there for him. And that allowed us to get my message out consistently, everything that we were standing for, all the positive things about the campaign, all the positive things about what was going on in Alabama, and have that amplified. The way Dan explained what Republicans are doing is exactly the way we ran our social media army in 2017. We built it from scratch. It got out there, and that brought in dollars for my candidacy, and it brought in volunteers all across the state, all across the country that came into Alabama to knock on doors, to be those telephone operators that Dan was talking about. But we had that army that was out there. It was an incredible, and we built on that. Now, candidly, I did best, Biden by 7 points in this race, based in large part on the infrastructure and the army that we built. It could not in 2020 compete, though, with the legions that the Republicans had to throw at me. Dan, Alicia, I think, was talking about how you get wrapped in defunding the police, socialism. All of that was thrown at me. And our army did a heck of a job, but you could not overcome just the legions. It's the day in, day out, absolute lies that were out there, some coming out of my opponent's own mouth. So to say we're behind is an understatement. To say that we need people like DemCast is also an understatement. We've got to have them. I'm just telling you, folks, we've got to have them. If we don't have organizations like DemCast has been the leader of for so long now, we can't sustain the occasional victory that we saw in 2018 when we had a bigger majority in the House. We can't sustain the victory of Joe Biden, because remember, while everybody loves to look at the 7 million votes that he outpolled Donald Trump across the country, when you get right down to it, he won by 40,000 votes among about 3 states. That's just the way the map is not good for us in the presidency, and it's getting worse for us in Congress. If we want to sustain these victories, we've got to start building this, and we've got to get people to understand how important it is, not just candidates and not just our party structures, but we got to get the grassroots folks out there to understand how important this is and how they can help with this by amplifying the messages. The one thing that I want to mention again, Dan talked about this, is that we're getting beat on the megaphone. And I may disagree with Dan a little bit about our message, because I do think we're kind of inconsistent among ourselves, and we need to have some more consistency. But the problem that we've got is that with the megaphones that these guys have against us, they take the inconsistencies and they pull out the things that help them the most, and that's what they amplify. We don't have the ability to amplify all the consistencies. And I'll leave you with the last point I'll make about that is, if you look at what has been going on with Democrats in the Congress all summer long, you've heard the media, social media, all they've done is play up the differences between the moderates and the progressives. That's all we've heard, the differences in the amount. But if you go back and you look at the tweets and you go back and you look at the interviews and everything that everybody has said, they've always ended by saying, we want to get something done. We're there for the American people. We want to get a bill passed. That hasn't been amplified the way it should be. And that's what DemCast is able to do. That's why they come up with a Democrats deliver. And so going forward, we're going to have that messaging.
Thanks, Nick. There's a great team in formation for DemCast Michigan, and we're committed to being the model for this type of work in the United States. And I would like you to help us do that. I'd like you to be part of the team. And not only are we getting outworked, as Dan Pfeiffer had to say, we're also getting out-financed pretty badly. So it would be great if you could make a donation. Anything that you donate today will be put to super good use. There's a link to Act Blue. And if you make a donation tonight or in the next few days, we have a generous donor who will double it. As you can tell by now, this organization pinches pennies, and there's lots that they need to do that's going to take more funding. So please help. Also, if you're interested in helping us, either by being an amplifier, and I understand not everybody's comfortable being on social media, but there are lots of other things that you can be doing to help out. There's a link in the chat as well for that. If you'd like to learn more about what some of the opportunities are and like to see just how easy it is to do this. I'm personally committed to generating 1 million impressions in 2022. And you might think, oh boy, is Chuck going to be busy? But once you see the DemCast system and you see how easy it is to use, I can do that in 5 minutes a week. And I know that's a pretty outrageous claim, but I look forward to showing you how that can happen. This is not hard to do. And as I said earlier, one thing we've got is we have relationships. And we've heard that relationships trump everything else. It trumps money. It trumps the media. It can trump the lies. And I promised you, at least some of you, in one of my headlines or in one of the emails I sent out, if you attend tonight's sessions, I'll give you hope. There is hope. We hear a lot of bad news, but I think tonight, Senator Jones and Dan Pfeiffer gave you some idea as to why we're getting this bad news and that we can reverse it. We can do it, but it's going to take all of you. So please, please donate if you can and indicate your interest in helping us in any case. So Nick or whatever, what would you use some money for, additional money? How big's your paid staff?
At the moment, we have me and Jamie, and Lori is our digital strategist, director of strategy, who is still volunteering the heck out of. So we like you said, we run a tight ship, not intentionally, I'll say. I mean, we would love to have Lori fully staffed or fully on board, and others. We need. So just to sort of frame it up for everybody, what we do behind the scenes, obviously, like if we're talking about creating an army, well, armies need sergeants or brigadier generals and all that kind of stuff. We need the curation. We need to find all the content for people to share, right? So behind the scenes, we need to make it as easy as possible for people to share stuff. We don't want everybody going out and looking for the most effective content and the most effective messaging to share. That's on us. So that's something that we need to do centrally. And then it's not enough to just find a good article to share. We've found that for people to actually go to the effort to actually put it out on their own social media feed. You actually have to take it a step further and distill that article, basically summarize that article in a social media post amount of language to put into a toolkit, so that people will actually share it. So there's volunteer management, curation, and message distillation. Those are the three things that we need to do centrally, in addition to data. Like we want to be data driven. So we need a director of data. We need to be able to highly target people to recruit into DemCast, and also we need to be able to report back really specifically about who we're hitting and how we're hitting them, and what the impact is of those things. So data director, volunteer management, communications people. That's how we need to build our centralized team to be as effective as possible. Right now, we're doing a great job, but we are at capacity, and it's kind of duct taped and MacGyvered together. So but we can.
It needs to be 10 or 100 times bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of the DemCast model is working with partners, and we want to work with partners in Michigan. And I know some of you are associated with other organizations. We would love to make a presentation to them, and we'll bring along the videos. And we'd love to work with our partners and see what content that they're interested in, and help them in any way we can. So,
and
please
Michigan was our very first partner organization when we first launched, which was Paula and Swim. So literally our very first partner organization right after we launched.
I did not know that.
That's why Michigan has always been our favorite.
Of course.
Right from the beginning.
Yes. So we should recognize Paula Mante, who's been here and fighting for this much longer than I have, and Julie Campbell-Bode, and Gina Keller, and Jill Schultz. And we're looking for more people to get involved, but we want to crush it. We want Michigan to show the rest of the country, this is how you do it. So please,
we have a question about state-specific messaging. And that's actually one aspect where partners on the ground are so critical. I'm from Utah. I don't know the issues that are important to Michigan. So we want to make sure we're working with partners on the ground, especially in our focus states, to make sure that messaging is on point.
Are there any questions that we need to address? We do have a few minutes left. This will be recorded. We will distribute it to those who are interested. There was a question about what is it that we would like. Yes, we'd like donations, and you don't have to join DemCast at this point. We're not asking you to do that, but we are asking you to express an interest in learning more. And if you are already so convinced that this is something you want to pursue, then so note. But we'll get back to you if you drop me an email, or there's a link there, and we can talk later about how what we're doing could match your interests and capabilities. And as I said earlier, you don't have to be a social media maven. So, and by the way, we have a celebrity in our midst. Lori here is the one who coined the term Democrats deliver.
She did.
So talk about effective messaging.
For real.
Yep, for real. And she's not paid. Remember that.
And it was on the back of the DNC bus in Virginia. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why didn't I trademark that, huh?
Yeah.
Well.
But it's a great, thank you for bringing that up, Chuck, because it's a great way, it's a great example of like how bottom-up messaging can end up permeating the sort of the collective conscious that's out there, right? And that's something, that's the promise of what we're doing here.
During impeachment, impartial justice was Lori.
Yep.
One of the questions in chat, Chuck, if I could just have 1 second to answer, is talking about can they get their blue state friends involved? And I think that's what makes DemCast great is that you can, if you're in a super safe blue area, what do? How can you affect change? And if you're in a super red, and I'm in a deep dark red Tennessee, what was so frustrating to me? What could I have done? But we give people lots of ways to cross, state lines, like sister district and swing district do, but you can adopt whatever state that you're interested in to help. And you can do that across social, and it works. We proved in 2020 that it works, that the people we're targeting see those messages. And we're able to pull and educate people, across the US. So it's definitely a way to get people involved when locally there's not much of an opportunity for them.
I think that's a good way to conclude this. Thank
Excellent.
you, Lori. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you,
Thank
Chuck.
you all for attending. Some of you know I do have a talk show called Conversations, and I skipped one of the sessions so I could do this, which was taking the gloves off. Where I took the gloves off, but I am going to put a commercial in on December 15th at 7 p.m. I'm going to be interviewing Nobel Prize winner Robert Lefkowitz. He's led a fascinating life. He's hawking a book. And one of the more interesting things about him is how he's someone of my advanced age who by all means should be dead from heart disease, because his parents both died from heart disease. And he will talk about how he has avoided his parents' fate, what he does. Interesting man, interesting book. Hope you can join me. So with that, thank you all once again. And we have work to do. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
The kitten says good night too.
No.